Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, December 20th, 2007. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. With this week, Peter Ossenhuis of Worth Brewing Company in Northwood, Iowa, joins us to talk about professional brewing on a home brewing scale. Peter is running a brewery in his small town using gear that you may have at home right now. If you're new to home brewing or would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through both basic and more advanced brewing techniques. Well, thanks again to everybody who's picked up our DVDs and our logbook for Christmas gift giving. And I hope those who find our stuff under the tree are happy about it. And if you expect our stuff but don't find it, if your hints go unheeded on Christmas Day, the store will be there afterwards. If I sound a little different today, it's because I've been kicked out of my studio. We're having some work done up there, and guys with hammers are beating on the wall of my little recording space. So rather than have them take a break and pay them for just standing around while I record this, I've moved to another area. It's all about economics. Thanks to everybody for your brewing nightmare stories. Steve and I got together last night and recorded next week's show featuring those stories. That was a lot of fun, and you'll be hearing that next week. Taking a look in the mailbag this week, Tyler from Salt Lake City, Utah wrote in with a handful of questions, one of which was, I get confused about the difference between aerating your wort and oxidizing it, and how to do one and not the other. Well, it all has to do with timing, essentially. The one time that your beer needs oxygen is before fermentation starts. The yeast needs oxygen to grow and to get ready to digest all that sugar in the wort and turn it to alcohol. So however you aerate your wort, be it by shaking or aquarium pump or oxygen tank, it's important that the wort is aerated well pre-fermentation. And brewers like Chris Colby recommend adding a bit more oxygen right after fermentation starts when you're fermenting very high gravity beers, but that's not necessary with normal gravity beers. Where oxidation comes in is where the beer is already fermented. After fermentation, too much exposure to oxygen can cause staling. Some very big beers or some meads are said to benefit from a bit of oxidation over time, and that adds some interesting character to the beers or meads. But for most part, limiting the agitation and exposure to the air of the beer as you're handling it after fermentation, limiting that is recommended. So, aeration with oxygen before fermentation, good. After fermentation, bad. Hope that helps. Christian from New York wrote in with this. Christian says, I noticed in watching the video segments of your show that you do a fair amount of bottling. I've just recently started bottling again. My question is this. How long should I wait before I write off a batch of beer without carbonation? I bottled a double bock 2 weeks ago, only 2 weeks ago. It is 8.5% ABV, so I introduced another package of yeast just before bottling. Smart thing to do. I used the Cooper carbonation drops I saw you use with the 6-pack IPA. Yesterday, I tested a bottle and noticed a gas sound when I opened it. However, not fizz. Is it just a waiting game? Well, I've had a couple of similar questions in the past week or so on bottling, and I'm wondering if the weather has something to do with it. You know, as your house gets cooler in the wintertime, it may take bottles a bit longer to carbonate. But 2 weeks is not, wait for like a month or maybe more even before you just completely write off a beer. I think your double bock will carbonate just fine and condition just fine. And you need to make sure that your bottles are in a fairly warm place, not hot necessarily, but a warm place, because conditioning the beer is fermentation essentially, and the yeast have to be warm enough to do the job. If you're hearing a hiss when you open the cap, then something's going on in there. So I'd recommend just patience at this point. I think you've done the right thing by repitching this the fairly big beer with more yeast at bottling time. But, different beers will carbonate at different rates. And 2 weeks is definitely not necessarily a very long time. So patience, Christian. Of course, also we've talked about brewers in the past who've had problems with carbonation and found their cappers weren't working right. One brewer in England, I believe it was, put a balloon, or it might have even been a condom over the top of one of his beers, and he shook it up, and when the thing on the top inflated, he knew that he had a leak in his bottle cap. The things that we do for our beers. Mike from Grand Forks, North Dakota writes, I've been doing some catching up on listening to the podcast and wanted to comment on the labels. On the labels, period. I currently don't make labels often, but when I do, I print out my labels on regular bond paper and use an adhesive transfer tool to put a low-tack adhesive on the back of the label. Another solution for me, Mike says, since I keg, is to design my own tap handles. I use simple handled designs and transfer a black and white design onto the wood with carbon paper. I didn't know they make carbon paper anymore. You can use a Dremel to carve out the wood or a chisel. I then drill a hole in the bottom, and using some hardware I found at Lowe's that fits my tap, I epoxy the hardware into place. A fun, simple solution to always designing paper labels. Besides, your friends don't need a bottle when they come over and get it right off the tap. And Mike says the wooden tap handles are also a fun way to pass the time while I'm waiting for my water to boil on my electric stove. He says 2 to 3 hours, depending on the outside temperature. Woo! 2 to 3 hours waiting for the boil. I think Santa needs to bring Mike a new stove for Christmas. I appreciate the hint. The tip. One more email before we get into our interview. This one from Jason, who I believe neglected to say where he was from. Jason says, I have ordered 6 kits from the same company. So far, I brewed an IPA, Scottish Ale, Irish Red, and a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale clone. They have all came out the same color, dark amber. And although they don't all taste exactly alike, they do share a common sweet water/hop bitter kind of taste, kind of bland, not well balanced, no middle ground. Jason says, I know I'm brewing them well. My fermenting practices are coming together. Could it be me, or maybe the kits aren't all that great? Well, right off the bat, I want to say it's hard to diagnose something like this long distance, but one thing that I would look at is your yeast. I don't know where you got your kits, but if they all use the same sort of kind of cheap, generic dry yeast, then there's a chance that that's where your common flavor is coming from. Not too long ago, I played with a very cheap dry yeast just to see what it would do. And I'm not going to name brands, but I brewed what I thought was going to be a very nice, hoppy beer. But instead, the hops were very muted and kind of muddy tasting, and I was really disappointed. But then I tried the same recipe with a good quality dry yeast. This happened to be Sap Ale US 05, and the difference was amazing, and very similar to results that I've gotten with White Labs California Ale yeast, and I would imagine that Y Yeast's 1056 would give you the same results. The hop flavor was wonderful and clean, and not at all that muddy taste that I got with that cheap generic yeast. So Jason, if you want to stick with the brand of kits that you're buying, if you're mostly happy with them, go the extra mile and get some better quality yeast, either dry or liquid, and see if that makes a difference. And I'll bet it will. And let me know if it does, just to make sure that I'm on the right track there. Okay, every now and then I get messages asking to do a show on how to start a brewery or a brew pub. It seems to be every homebrewer's dream. Well, Peter Ossenhuis is living that dream at Worth Brewing Company in Northwood, Iowa, brewing with a system that you may have in your garage. Well, Peter Ossenhuis, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Well, thanks for having me, James. It's a pleasure.
Well, I asked you on because you were recommended as a good guest by your cousin, Chris Colby.
Yeah, Chris, I actually just met Chris a short time ago. He's a cousin. He's related in some way, a cousin or second cousin, and had a good talk with him when he visited the tap room a little bit ago. But yeah, we know there's a lot of mutual acquaintances between us.
And there's beer in the blood, apparently.
Apparently, I was pretty excited and surprised to hear that Chris was the editor of Brew Your Own, being very familiar with the magazine.
And I asked you on because you are, as all of our professional brewers that we have on the show, you are living the home brewer's dream. And I wanted to get your perspective because you are brewing on perhaps the smallest scale in the country.
Probably, yeah, and I'm reminded on a nightly basis that I'm living the dream by all the homebrewers around here who come in at night and tell me that. So I guess I am, and it is kind of that way. It may not be quite the dream that people think of, but it is basically a homebrew setup used in a professional operation here.
Well, before we get into the details of your current situation, let's get into some history of your homebrewing career. How did you get started, and how long did you homebrew before you started to make the leap?
Well, I started homebrewing in 1987, so it's a little 21 years now, I guess, going on 21, 22 years. I was in my mid-20s, I guess, and I was interested in starting to experiment with some import beers and was enjoying the different non-Bud and Miller products that were available then, and just was curious about how beer was made, and just started reading up about it on the few books I could find at the library, and discovered this was something that I could maybe do at home. And so, like everyone else, I bought the kit and added the 2 pounds of corn sugar and the dry yeast and made some really, really bad beer. But I kept my interest was still there, and I continued and started doing all grain pretty quickly after that, so probably within 6 months or so, which is pretty much what I've done since. But I've been pretty consistent on the home brewing. At certain points, of course, later I got into it more professionally. I brewed at Summit, which is a good microbrewer in St. Paul, Minnesota, distributes in the Midwest, and then worked for Northern Brewer, which a lot of people may know as a fairly big homebrewing supply company for a few years.
Oh, yeah.
But mostly a home brewer, and that's really where most of my brewing beer part of it, knowledge, whatever that is, has been gained from doing the home brewing.
So what kind of system did you have at home? Did you start off with the basics and ramp up over time?
Yeah, I fairly early on bought a big heavyweight stainless, about a 7-gallon stainless pot, which served me well until a few years, until I got the latest system here. I used that to mash in, and then I got a 10-gallon pot to boil in, and I had the plastic bucket lauter tun with the false bottom that I used. So pretty typical homebrew setup. The immersion chiller. Every once in a while, I'd add something new, like a pump for the lauter tun, and but in general, just using the stuff that's available for everybody.
So, at what point did you think that you could actually go into business and start selling this stuff yourself?
Well, it came up fairly quickly. A few years ago, we live just outside of a town, Northwood, Iowa, of about 2,000 people, a real small town in Iowa at the Minnesota border. So as you could imagine, there's really nothing available here. There's Bud and Miller, and there were several little bars in town, or I'd say 2 or 3 in town, and you could get some good beers at the liquor store in Mason City, which is about 30 miles away. And we thought, well, it'd be fun to have a brew pub in town. We were very involved in the community here and in historic preservation, and my wife has a business in one of the buildings on Main Street. And so I asked, and we actually rent some space to a restaurant downstairs, and I asked them if they'd ever be interested in having a little brew set up in their back. And they were totally unresponsive, weren't interested in that at all. But a short time later, another bar owner in town came up to me and highly encouraged me that they would like to have something at their place, and they'd give me room in the basement or do something, and that got me thinking, well, that might be one way to do it without really kind of jumping into the deep end, just kind of doing a brew pub or a brewery on my own. So that kind of got me researching some of the local and federal requirements, and would this even make sense, and researching some of the equipment options. I attended the Brewers Association conference in Seattle a few years ago, and to look at some of the equipment there, and kind of started working on a business plan, and but it was still kind of just this little fun idea, and I wasn't quite serious that it would be something we'd do. I just kind of wanted to research it a little bit. And then a building became available on Main Street, and I had some experience in rehabilitating historic buildings. We'd done that with our other office in town, and that's the one advantage that I'll tell people if they're ever going to do this. They probably, first of all, go to a small town in rural middle of America where you can afford the real estate, because that's the one advantage here, is that you can buy a building pretty cheap. And so we saw a building available. We bought it. I went to work on rehabilitating it and bought the Sabco system, which some people may be familiar with, the 10-gallon system I use here now, and went ahead and did got all the licenses in line and just started brewing. So that's kind of how it came about.
What were the biggest or most difficult hurdles, either legal or financial, or what were the big obstacles?
The obstacles were the federal licensing involves a lot of paperwork, although I have to say they do a pretty good job of certainly I was very pleased with my experience, and I'm just speaking from my own. You may have a different experience if you deal with someone else, but I think I sent an email to the TTB, the Tax and Trade Bureau, which is the government arm that oversees alcohol, and I immediately got an email back, or within a few days, with about 30 attachments with all the forms, and I seriously think there probably were 30, almost 20, 30 different things I had to fill out. So that was a little daunting, just to do everything from your personal background check to a map of where the nearest river is, to what you're going to do with your spent grain, to what other kinds of pollutants you'll be, the historic. I'm in a historic building, so that was another a form I had to, because I needed a federal license. I had to go through what they call a 106 check for the state. That then, there's lots of different things you have to do, but they were pretty good about immediately getting me everything I needed, and when I did send them in, didn't have a lot of hassle or revisions or things like that, and that came through okay. The state was also, Iowa was pretty good. They have something here called the Native Brewers classification, where the fee, it's only $250 a year for the license for the native brewer. And then, of course, on top of that, I sell beer here, so I needed a liquor license. In a small town in Iowa, that comes out to about $240 a year, too. So you're looking at a reasonable licensing amount. Insurance is by far the biggest expense. Dram shop insurance, the bonds for the federal and state licenses, and, of course, your regular business and liability insurance. But those were the hurdles, I guess. Not insurmountable, kind of looking back at it, but certainly when it comes over you download 30 attachments of forms and things you need and signatures, and it is a little daunting.
But you just got to take it one step at a time, one form at a time.
Right. It's just kind of the not knowing part that's the real impediment. Once it's kind of there, it demystifies a bit, and you can kind of work through things. Now whether that was end up being a smart thing or is something anyone with a system this small wants to do, it's I guess we can talk about that too. But
yeah, you do have a Sabco system that's a 10-gallon system, right?
Right. you can yield 10, 11, 12 gallons is the most you can do.
So there are brewers out there listening to this program who have more capacity at home than you do.
Right. I've talked to some and tried to get them some ideas of how I could ramp up something with the system I have. But yeah, that's the irony, is that they're actually have a smaller system than a lot of hobbyists out there, and more power to them.
So what was your decision on, why did you go with such a small system as opposed to investing right away in like a 7-gallon or a 7-barrel system?
Well, I knew enough about the industry. I knew that I wanted something about 10 times the size of what I was going to get. But I went, I'm in this town of 2,000, and seriously, I didn't know if this would sell. I mean, I had no clue if people would want to drink this stuff. And I've happily found that there are a lot of farmers around here who have given up their Miller and Bud and are adherents to our beers here. But at the time, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. We didn't obviously have the money to do, a $200,000 10-barrel system or something, and we could scrape together the $15,000-$20,000 to get a system that we have, the type of system we have now, with the low overhead we have here. Our thinking was, I'll brew a day, I'll spend another day kegging, cleaning, doing the other miscellaneous, and I'll continue my other work, and whatever I can't sell to local bars, wholesale, I'll sell out of the front of the building, for a couple hours, a couple nights a week. I mean, that was kind of our thought. Let's pay for the mortgage, make the mortgage payment, pay for the products, materials, and that's basically what we're doing here. We're doing better than that, but we're selling every drop out of the front, which is nice because you almost have to do that. I can almost lose money selling it wholesale, kegs wholesale to bars around here. So I'm making a full amount of money on all the beer, but again, it's a lot of time to make every pint of beer we're selling here.
Right. And I guess we haven't mentioned how long you've been in business.
Yeah, we're only, we're hitting our 9th month here. So everything I'm saying, I guess you could take with a grain of salt. I'm not speaking from years of experience. I'm giving kind of my initial impressions up to this point, but we've been very pleasantly surprised with the response. As I said, it's a rural town of agricultural community of 2,000, and we have a small, really reliable core group of people from town who weren't experienced beer drinkers who have more or less converted now. And then we've got another big core group of people who are a little more sophisticated beer people and home brewers and people who are experienced with other styles of beer from the surrounding communities. We probably have communities of 20, 30,000 within 45 miles who we get a good crowd from that area who travel here just for the beer.
And what's your work week look like? You've still got a day job, or you've still got an additional job.
Right. I work for my wife has a consulting engineering business, so I have the luxury of having a little bit of leeway. I work for her ostensibly full time, although it hasn't worked out that way for 9 months. But I'll brew 2 batches every time I brew. I'll brew 2 10-gallon batches and put it into a 27-gallon fermenter. I'll do that usually on Mondays and Tuesdays, so I'll do 4 batches, and then sometimes I'll do another couple batches, so 4 to 6 batches a week, but I probably am spending 3 full days here, 2 full days working for her, and then, of course, 3 nights and all-day Saturday working, basically running the pub, which is the retail end of the main end of our operation here. So we are really just running a brew pub, an English kind of style pub here.
Have you got any help working for you?
No, we've had some part-time help here and there. We really need some help, but I'm very picky. I'm very picky that we have a beer specialty bar. We don't want someone here who doesn't like beer or isn't used to drinking beer and isn't willing to learn. It's kind of tough. I mean, it's tough to find help in a town like this for anything. But we're trying to, between my wife and I, we're running the operation full time or every hour. So right now we really don't have any other help.
Wow.
Not to mention the amount of money we'd make. It's tough to part with half of it at the end of the night for an employee too.
Sure. Well, so this is you've got to have advantages and disadvantages to having a system this small. I mean, I guess one advantage is that you can be nimble and kind of brew with the seasons.
Absolutely, and that's really the greatest pleasure in this setup is that I have a different brew every month. I mean, I've got three. I've got a pale ale, a typical Cascade heavy pale ale. I've got a brown ale. That's, I think, maybe the consistently best beer we do. I've got what we call Slim Jim, which is kind of a cream ale style that we kind of promote as the light option for people who are a little wary of going something dark. But our most popular beer by far is every month special, and we've had a dry Irish stout, we've had a Hefeweizen, we've had we call a Belgian Grand Cru. We can talk about our limits with alcohol in Iowa here, which keeps us from doing too many Belgians. But we've done a lot of lagers. I really aged the lagers quite a while. We've had a Märzen, we've had a Dunkel, we've had a Helles Bock. We've got a Pilsner coming up and another traditional Bock. We've got an oatmeal stout, and right now what we call a winter warmer, an English style ale. So we're able to do these specialty beers every month, and I put one keg on. Depending on how many I've made, sometimes I'll have 2 kegs a weekend, and generally probably 75% of the sales are those specialty beers until they run out, and then we do the other 3, which the other 3 all sell very, very consistently, which is also another surprise. I brew about the same amount of those all the time.
Have you ever just run out of beer?
I haven't. We opened up either really stupid or really smart on St. Patrick's night, and we had the local daily paper, the biggest local daily paper, had a big feature story on the cover the day we opened, and we did probably, I thought we sold about what I thought would be 3 weeks worth of beer that night, and we ran out of certain styles. And the first few months, I continually would run out of certain of our regular beers until I kind of got things dialed in. But we had the biggest night by double of any night since then on our opening night. But we've never actually run out of beer. We try to keep it. It's about a month turnover between the time we brew our regular beers and serve them.
So what are the disadvantages to being that small?
Well, as I've kind of talked about, it's simply the labor-intensive aspect of having to produce 80 pints, taking 5 hours to produce 80 pints of beer, or maybe more accurately, taking 8 hours to produce 160 glasses of beer, and it's that's very inefficient. Beer is a very profitable item, but if you can make enough of it, it's profitable. And that's the kind of thing some people don't understand when they see me selling all the beers out front. But that it, unlike even a microbrew makes, even the smallest brew pub is making 10 times as much beer as I'm making in the same amount of time. So that's by far the only big disadvantage to using this system.
We recently talked to Cousin Chris about the hop shortage. Now, you are just a step above being a home brewer, so you've got to be experiencing, the hop shortage and the barley situation as well, almost as painfully as what we are or will be as home brewers.
Sure. And actually, as far as hops, I was, basically just a home brewer, and as far as my supply, I would get them from Northern Brewer, like anyone would. I get my malt through a regular distributor, as a brewer would. But with hops, my quantity was so small, I didn't have a contract with any of the producers. And when this hit several months ago, I started trying to get a supply, and I was able to buy basically a year's worth of what I use from Hop Union, but I couldn't get in any of the hops I currently use. I couldn't get any import hops. I couldn't get any whole leaf hops. So I was happy to be able to basically have enough hops for the coming year, but I have to reformulate all my recipes now. And since I've bought others on spot, but at $25 a pound was the most recent amount I had to spend to get some of these, and they were limiting me to 2 pounds for any particular variety. So I'm set for a year. I got a lot of hop rhizomes coming in the spring. I've got an acreage. I'm going to try to produce. They grow here. Hopefully they can get a good quality and be able to supply myself a little bit with some hops. But I like everyone else, I'm going to need to keep searching to get some more hops down the road.
So are you looking at new styles that you might not have thought of before?
Well, certainly not so much new styles, but certainly they're going to be a little different beers. My pale ale that is a Cascade heavy pale ale is certainly going to change character if I can't find any more Cascade. I'll eventually run out of that this year unless I can find some more. So that's the beer, the particular beer I do that I'm going to worry about a little bit. I've got some pretty big fans of that are probably going to tell a difference, but that's just something we're going to have to deal with. And again, it's a little advantage to my size is that no one's expecting me to be a Budweiser consistent product. I mean, I like to have consistency, but they realize that I'm changing beers a lot, and that there could be alterations, little changes here and there. So.
And being small, and you're being there all the time, you can talk to your customers directly and let them know what's going on.
That's another big advantage, of course. It's down a disadvantage because I have to be here all the time, but it is a huge advantage. People see that we're here, either me or my wife. They know that we're serious about it. They know that we're knowledgeable about it, and we can talk to them about any of the questions they may have. And I was surprised how people they come into a place like this, and their conversations are about beer. I mean, you just overhear people, and even if they're not beer experts, they just to a large extent they're in here enjoying the beer and talking about it, and it's really rewarding and interesting.
So you've got a brewery and you serve food, which is kind of a double whammy. I mean, most restaurants fail within, say, their first year or two, and now you've got a restaurant and a brewery on top of that.
Right. I knew in my head that I would probably have to have some food and that we'd have to do a good job with that, but I'm not sure I really internalized that enough. And it is a real challenge, and it's probably been the biggest frustration for me is we have a fairly limited appetizer-type menu of about 6 items that we like to do here. And with the amount of people we have coming in, it's tough. It's a tough thing to predict what to make and how much to make, and my wife is involved with that a lot. And there's, it's gotten to be a bit of a strain. That part of it, I think, causes me more because I'm not as confident in that area of it, and I know it's important, but and it's not a big part of the business, but I think it still is important to have that as an option, have an appetizer menu, so we're known as more than just a beer bar. But it is a challenge, and it is it is bringing in some more money, and I think it is important to have. But like you say, it's running a restaurant is a tough job, and that's really what we're doing here.
So what's in the cards for the future? Look into your crystal ball and tell us where Worth Brewing Company is going to be in a year or two. Well,
I'd like to say that and I have no doubts that we'd be able to raise money to do a bigger sized 10-barrel brewery or not so much brew pub, but maybe be more of a brewery distributing to the bars and restaurants in our county and our surrounding counties. I think that would be very successful. It's tough to do right now when I'm not sure I could get enough hops for my little brew system. When that stabilizes, I guess, down the road in the next few years, we'd be looking at maybe that possibility. I'd like to be more of a production brewery and less of a brew pub. And so I guess to be the dream down the road, we would be a very small brewery making real high-quality beer for all the little bars in these little towns in our 5-6 county region. That would be kind of where I'd like to be eventually.
So I wouldn't be surprised if we caused car accidents because of all the homebrewers daydreaming as they're driving to work, listening to this program, and thinking about, I'd love to be doing what he's doing. So what advice can you give the listeners who have stars in their eyes now of doing what you're doing on a small scale or even a larger scale?
Well, I would say, like 5 points, and some of them aren't going to be possible for a lot of people, but number one is low overhead. I mean, you're not going to be making much from a small, and I'm talking about someone doing it with a small system like this. I mean, obviously, there's plenty of more experts you could go to if you're going to open a regular brewery or brew pub, but if you want to do something like I'm doing, I have the advantage of being in a place where you can, my 2-story historic brick building here on Main Street in a historic district costs $37,000. Now, people from a large town would probably find it fairly hard to find that kind of a location. And it's a very nice building, and it's a very nice atmosphere in here for a pub. But low overhead, if you can at all do that, get someplace where you don't have to sell 11 months of beer to pay your rent and hope to pay the rest of your bills with the last month would be ideal. If you're in a state where laws can be sympathetic to small brewers, in Iowa, the biggest downfall is we can't brew over 5% by weight. So there, I was mentioning something about Belgian ales. That knocks a lot of my favorite and a lot of probably our listeners' favorite type beers off the menu. But we, as I said, the fees aren't onerous here in Iowa, and I'm able to self-distribute when and if that ever becomes a viable option for me. Part-time, if you can possibly work something part-time, keep some type of job. Maybe a single person could, probably confident a single person working full-time at something like this could make it go if they have humble needs. Maybe partner with an existing restaurant might be the most economically feasible way to do it. And certainly I would recommend doing it with a successful restaurant, not somebody who's trying to look to save their restaurant, because that's not going to work. But if you can get someone with a good restaurant who wants to offer something else, and that's a way that you could do it on maybe a part-time basis, very low overhead. And again, state laws might limit some of that depending on where you're at. But I guess the bottom line is you just have to do something like this because you like doing it, and the satisfaction you get from doing it, because you're not going to really make much money on a scale like this.
It's all about the love of beer and the love of the process.
Yes.
Well, one last question: have you had any politicians drop by your establishment yet?
No, we were hoping we'd get John Edwards last night. He was down the road with Kevin Bacon, I guess. The actor was with him. But yeah, we've had a lot of, they all come through here. Last night we had Obama, John Edwards, Joe Biden, I think maybe was nearby. But yeah, every 4 years we get that. And I have a little offer on the bottom of my webpage that we get, any candidate gets 50 cents off their first pint. That's not good on the specialty pints, though.
Now, would you have to declare that with the federal government, giving a contribution to a political candidate?
Well, I think they may have more problems with it than I would, but you'd have to check with your lawyer with that.
And it's too bad that you couldn't get Kevin Bacon to drop by. That way you'd have 1 degree of separation.
Absolutely. We'd cut out 5 of them, wouldn't we? Yeah. I had my camera ready just in case.
Oh, well, this has been fun.
Well, I appreciate you calling.
And I wish you the best of luck, and maybe we'll check in with you on down the line and see how you're coming along.
Yeah, that would be great.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, James.
Well, thanks again to Peter Ossenhuis, and also thanks to Chris Colby of Brew Your Own Magazine for putting me on to Peter as a potential interview subject. I'll put a link to Worth Brewing Company in the description of this episode on basicbrewingradio.com. Well, next week, Steve Wilkes and I read your brewing nightmare stories. And also, this week, check Basic Brewing video, where Steve makes a fruitcake out of the barley wine that I made. And boy, that stuff is just killer. We've still got just a small hunk of that fruitcake in the kitchen. It's just, man, if you hate fruitcake, it's because you've been eating the wrong stuff, I tell you. Well, I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. And if you don't celebrate Christmas even, I hope you get to spend time with those that you care about. And I hope that you get to do something that you enjoy doing. And please enjoy the season. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. The 2008 Brewer Logbooks are here. Check them out on our site, and also check out the new low-tech lagering and decoction mashing DVD, where you can see Steve do a single-step decoction mash, and also follow me through a lager fermentation in the middle of summer here in Northwest Arkansas, where I don't even use a dedicated chest freezer. There are also our original DVDs and Basic Brewing Introduction to Extract Home Brewing. We walk you through the extract brewing process step by step, from boiling to bottling. And in Basic Brewing Stepping into All Grain, we take you through the all grain process, from milling your grain to collecting your wort. We got new combo deals out there to save you a few bucks if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time. And you can also see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it from me online, and I'll box it up myself. And remember, our shirts and hats are out there as well, including our ever-popular Go Forth and Flocculate shirt. And thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are sterling silver Celtic design oval dangle earrings and matching pendant. And Arrested Development, the complete series. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We appreciate your support greatly. That's all. Until next week. Next week being the last show of 2007. Until then, happy holidays. Thanks for listening. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson, our buddy in Austin, Texas, who also did our logo. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.